Hey, what's going on, everybody? Alex here with Freedom Mowers. I hope you all are doing well. Today we've got a John Deere. It's a 2018, but it's been pretty well neglected. We're going to see what all this machine needs and try to get everything fixed and get it fully operational again. So let's check it out and see how bad it is and what we got to fix. All right, and this is it. 2018 E180 John Deere. I did look to see what a comparable mower today would be, and probably out the door you'd be a little over $4,000. This is a 25 horse Briggs V-twin hydrostatic transmission with a 54-inch cutting deck and the larger wheels on it. I've looked over some of the stuff on this machine and I'll give you guys the rundown of what I know. The seat is in pretty rough shape. There's some holes in it. It's starting to separate. It's missing the knob for the lumbar support. It has it on the other side. So I may end up swapping out a seat with another John Deere. That's if everything goes as planned on here. The mowing deck is in rough shape. It is missing an idler pulley over here. It is totally packed with dirt towards the middle. There's a bungee cord that's running somewhere into the dirt under there. I did feel the spindles. They are free, but the bearings on them are toast. There's a ton of play. At least on this side and the other. I don't know about the middle pulley. I'm trying to think what else I knew off the bat. So he did tell me, I'll show you guys under the hood, but the issue was he had the pulley had locked up, he removed it, and then the machine sat for a couple of months. Then he went to go move it to wherever he was going to work on it, and he was having issues with it starting. So he removed the starter solenoid, and then I guess just got frustrated with it and listed it for sale. Has the front and forward and reverse pedals, the separate pedal on it. And another thing I noticed is on the other side, the front support, there's like a piece of baling wire that's holding it on, not even a cotter pin. Has the V-twin Briggs, like I said, 25 horse. I did hook the jumper pack to it just to make sure that it turns over, and it does. Sounds like it has decent compression, and I didn't hear anything crazy going on with the engine, but I do remember that the oil was low on it, so that will have to be topped off before we do much of anything. And no battery. But this machine does have 98.4 hours on it, which is crazy. This is a under 100-hour mower, and it was pretty beat up. So what I want to do is get this thing pulled in the shop. We can start trying to figure out what's going on with it, try to get it up and running, and then from there we can kind of figure out what all needs repair. But this deck is huge on here, so what I want to do is go ahead and drop this mowing deck off from here. We can get a better look at what's going on with that, and then we can get into the mower as well. So on these you have just this rear hanger, and then there's a middle hanger, and then the front is the same on the other side. You've got a rear, a middle, and then just getting that front bar off from there. And since our belt is already off, we don't have to worry about slipping it off from the electric PTO, so then it should just come right out. I'm gonna get the deck pulled off from here, pull it in the shop, and we'll go from there. So the guy that I got this from, he was upgrading to a 0-turn, and he took the battery out of here, I guess, as a backup for him. So we don't have one. We're going to be using the jumper pack to test everything out. Now what I want to do is go ahead, we can test out the wiring, make sure that everything works as it should, because he said he was having issues with the starting on it. We're going to go ahead and put in a brand new 4-post solenoid. I got this one from Stens, and you can find a lot of their stuff on Amazon. The part number for this one is a 435-151, and this should be a nice starting solenoid to last us quite a few years. I did have to look up how this one mounts in here, and I'll bring you guys in a little bit closer, but I'm going to go ahead and get the jumper pack hooked up. Now as far as the way we're going to hook this up, it doesn't matter which end I hook to. This end right here is supposed to be the one that goes to the starter solenoid, and the one with the bigger boot on the top is the one that was supposed to go to the battery, but either way it will work. I'm going to go ahead and clamp onto here, and then we're going to just double check to see if we're getting 12-volt signal to our wire, and then if everything's good there, we'll go ahead and get the solenoid installed. Right, got everything hooked up here. Just got the positive onto the positive, and we are grounded out on our cable. So on a 4-wire solenoid, you're going to have one leg that's going to be a ground, the other one is going to be a 12-volt signal that comes from your key switch, and then you're going to have a hot lead that comes from your battery, and then the other lead is going to be connected, and that goes straight to your starter. And once this receives that 12-volt signal, there's a plate that comes up and just makes contact between these two, and that's when your starter gets its 12 volts. So it doesn't matter which leg is ground or positive, it just needs to see both of those connected. So I've got the purple wire here, which is supposed to be our hot lead, and I can hear our anti-backfire solenoid turning on from the carburetor. And you guys can see here as I'm turning the key switch to the start position, because I've got the parking brake set in, that we're lighting up good there. So we should get 12 volts to our starter solenoid, and then we can go ahead and I can hook my test light to the positive, and we'll just double check where's my ground. So that's lighting up. So let's check the ground wire that goes to the solenoid, and we are good there. So we've got ground and we've got 12-volt signal with the key in the starting position, so we should be all set there. Now the way that this one mounts in, let me disconnect our cables. The way this mounts in here on this machine is well, the bolt is still here. Unthread this, and then one of these little ears slides under this bracket, and then that's pretty much it. I gotta figure out what size this is, and I'll get this mounted up. Now on a 3-post, usually the mounting bolt is what actually grounds the solenoid, but on this one it has its own separate ground that goes onto these little legs. So what I need to do is I'll just connect up the ground, I'll connect up the positive, and then we'll hook up the starter wire here on the outside and the other end of our cable onto the other one, and then we should be all set. So let me get everything set up on here, I'll show you guys that, and then we'll turn the key, see if we can get this thing spinning over. Alright, I got this all buttoned up. You guys can see, so I think originally our purple wire was on this outer leg, but it doesn't matter. Like I said, it just, one needs to see ground, one needs to see a signal from the key switch. We've got our other 12-volt that goes to our starter, and then the other one just goes to our jumper pack or battery. As long as the starter's good, we should be turning over at this point. So we'll go ahead and move this off the top. We'll go ahead and turn it over, or see if it's going to turn over for us. If it does, then we'll go ahead and check the oil on it, check the air filter, and then we can pop the air filter off and dribble a little bit of fuel down in here, see if we can't get it to start, and we'll see, you know, what we've got to do as far as fuel system on here. But we'll go ahead and give this thing a little turnover. Alright, so we are turning over with that. It did look like there was a little bit of smoke coming out, but that might just be steam. It's 27 degrees out right now. It's 36 in the shop. Alright, so we are good there. Yeah, let's go ahead. We'll check that oil real quick on here. Now this has been sitting for, I've had this machine here in the tent now for about 8 months. I don't know if you guys can see that, it's pretty darn low. And a guy said it had been about a year since he ran it, so we'll see how it's going to go with the fuel system. Taking the carburetor off. I've done a few of these Briggs V-twin carbs. Alright, I got this topped off, and it almost took an entire quart, which is crazy. I just don't understand Yeah, we're right at the full mark. Oil didn't look that dirty. I just don't understand how, you know, this stuff gets so neglected. I mean, this was a nice machine. I mean, if you're gonna spend, I think this was around like $3,000 in 2018, but I mean, it's just crazy to let your mower just go to pieces. I mean, obviously the engine oil is the lifeline. I mean, you guys have seen the engines that I've torn down before that were basically grenaded themselves because of lack of oil. Now I've got just, well, probably a little splash in here. I might have to refill it, but we're going to give this a little squirt here and see what happens. I think all I got is one shot at this, and then we'll have to refill the bottle, so we'll go ahead and choke. Here we go. If you guys are watching this and you don't know about fuel pump setups on here, so the tank on this machine sits a little bit lower than the carburetor, or it sits pretty close to level, so you need, because it's a rear tank, you need it to pump up to the carburetor and keep a constant flow. Well, the only way for these to work is on the valve cover. There's this line right here which runs off your crankcase pressure, and that's what gives this a pulse. It's just constantly pulsing, and that's what pumps the fuel up. So without that connected, that is crazy that it's running. Well, that answers a lot of questions. So obviously we need to get the pulse line replaced. I've got one of those, and then I guess we'll see if this, we'll just replace that. We'll see how this is running, and then we'll kind of just go from here. All right, and here is a better look at that hose. I just can't believe this thing is running. Maybe it was siphoning the gas somehow, but one of the things I noticed too when I just got the light over here is the amount of oil that's coming behind the valve cover here onto the cylinder head. So more than likely we're gonna have, it looks like both sides are like this, we're gonna have to change out the gaskets on here. And I've got a couple more of these hoses here. The part number is a 596163. And but what I want to do, I'll get all this wiped down because I don't want this crud falling down in the valve cover, and then we'll get this swapped out. Basically all you need to do is get this little ring to tuck underneath of the valve cover, and then the upper ring is on the outside, and then just plug it right into it. And I've got that all cleaned up. We should just be able to pull up on it. I don't want to drop the bottom part of it down in there, so I'm going to try to pry up a little bit, because sometimes that bottom part will actually come off and fall down in there. So that's pretty much all it is to it. Now getting it worked back in there can be a little tricky, so you can kind of just start working, get one edge started, and then I like to aim that towards the back, and then usually take a small screwdriver. Just be careful not to poke through it, but if you're gentle with it, it will just fall right into place. We'll start getting this all tucked in. Yep, that's all the way in. because once it's in, it should rotate on you. So we are good there, nice and flush. Go ahead and connect up. Goodness gracious, that thing doesn't want to go up, does it? Everything's so stiff out here because we're so darn cold. We're actually expecting snow today here in eastern North Carolina. We shall see. Alright, we are hooked up there. Let me get this stuff out the way and we'll see if this will start up and run on its own. I don't know why I said start up and run on its own. We already know it'll run on its own. Alright, we are still good. Park and brake set. Alright, here we go. Well, it is running a little bit better, but you guys can hear it's still spitting and sputtering. I don't know how old the gas is in here. Also, we'll have to check the plugs, make sure those look good. But we may end up not having to clean the carb. We'll see. I'll probably throw some fresh fuel in here, like I said, and I've got some new plugs. We'll see if that clears it up. If not, we'll get into that fuel system. But I think at this point, we'll at least get underneath and see what the drive system looks like and the pulleys, and then we can take it from there. So starting at the back, I do not see anything going on as far as leaks on the hydrostatic. All the fan blades look good on the cooling fan for it. I went ahead and spun the pulleys here. They've got some slack on it because I've got the parking brake engaged, and these were all nice and smooth on here, and our belt looks to be in really good shape. I hardly see any wear on it, and no cracking or anything like that. So I believe we are in pretty good shape. It definitely has some surface rust under here, but as far as our pulleys and belts go, I think we are pretty good. We'll have to check to see how good the steering is on it, and you know, if we have to do anything as far as getting that lubricated, doing the greasing the front end, all that fun stuff. I'm just gonna go ahead and show you guys, see what's in this tank. I've got this fuel pump here, little hand operate, or a little battery operated one. I'm gonna see what we've got. Alright, well, I let this sit for a minute. It's gonna be a little bit hard to see, but down there in that corner, you guys can see that bubble and that debris. That's water in the tank. Alright, so the way these are set up, it has a tube that comes in from the top and actually pulls the fuel. So there was really no good way for me to totally empty the tank. So what I did is I ran quite a few shop rags down in there. Show you guys. best I can. And that is the bottom of the tank. It's all nice, clean, as dry as I can get it. And so I think we're good. We're gonna end up putting some fresh fuel in it, and we'll pump it for a minute. We'll put a new fuel filter on, make sure we're getting nice fresh gas out. And I've got a new Stens fuel filter for this one. This is a 120-436. So I'm gonna wrestle these lines and get this filter on. And then I'll show you guys when we're priming this thing. There we go. But let me get the rest of the way off. We'll pop on the new one, and then I'll show you guys priming this up. All right, got the filter on, plugged in the pulse line. It's gonna be kind of dangling there for a minute while we're holding this, priming it up. But I'll go ahead and make sure you guys can see everything here. I put enough in the tank where I can see it's above the pickup tube. Solenoid just clicked on. All right, here we go. Don't want to run that starter too long. Seems like we've got all fresh fuel coming up. I'll rotate it a couple more times, and then we'll just hook up the fuel line to the carb, see if it'll fire up. All right, we'll call that good there. That looks nice and fresh. I don't see any water at the bottom. So I kind of turn this fuel line. It's all so stiff right now because of the weather. None of this is pliable. All right, make sure we're not kinked on the pulse line. Let me get the clamp on the fuel hose. All right, so I think we are good there with the fuel system. Like I said, we'll go ahead and pop these plugs out. I'll show you guys some new plugs I'm putting in, and then we will, I'm gonna let this cool down for a couple hours, and we'll hit that valve adjustment. All right, we're gonna go ahead and put those plugs in. I've got some Champion RC12YCs. I was just double checking these out of the box to make sure that the coil gap was right, and we're right at about 30 thousandths, which is what should be. So we'll pop these ones out. I can see that these ones are Champions, but I don't know which ones they are. And looks like these were burning pretty decent. Little bit black on the outside, and this is a XC92YC. But we'll just go ahead. I'm gonna pop in the new one here. I'm gonna get the other side, and then we'll work on the valves once this cools down. All right, real quick, while I am waiting for this thing still to cool down, I was working on blowing out all the fins on the cylinder heads, and I wanted to show you guys just the amount of stuff that came out from there. It's crazy to think, you know, how much was packed in these fins. And you guys have probably seen some of my other videos where I was working on engines that have overheated. I mean, you can have head gasket problems, end up locking up the engine, warping the heads, have valve issues. So definitely pays off to keep these engines clean and keep these valve covers from leaking and getting everything stuck in there. So all right, and this next day we're gonna knock these valve adjustments out. I did go ahead and pull the spark plugs out that I've already put in, which I should have thought about yesterday. But on these, the engine needs to be cold, because if it's still warm, the metal expands, and this is the way to get it to the correct setting. So this thing is ice cold. We are at 30 degrees in the shop right now. Just started the heater up. Our intake is supposed to be between 3 and 5 thousandths, and the exhaust is supposed to be between 5 and 7. So I've got a 3 and a 7 set up already. I'll show you guys. We're going to change out these gaskets too. But 4 3/8. And we're going to see if this one already has gaskets or if it's this one's sealant, which does not look like it was doing a very good job, because that came right off. And it definitely looks like this one had been leaking. So the reason I pulled those plugs out is so that I can turn the engine over easier by hand. And the way that I like to set valves is I like to open one completely, and then I'll adjust the other. Once I'm done with that, then I'll rotate the engine till the other one's all the way open, and then I will work on the other. So we'll go ahead and spin this over. So right there, it's all the way at the bottom. That is on our intake. Your intake is going to come from your intake runner. Also, the intake has an aluminum push rod. So we are going to check our exhaust, see where we're at with that. Check it with a 5 thousandths. And honestly, that is about perfect right there. I've got a little bit of drag, so I don't think we're even going to adjust that one. Let's check our intake. Alright, so we should be good there. Then I've got my 3 thousandths. And that one does feel a little bit loose, so we'll go ahead and adjust that one. I can't remember the nut size on it. Let's see. So we're gonna have to take this nut loose, which is our locking nut, and then our adjuster is actually the Torx bit on this one. So I've got the right Torx bit. Let me see what size this is. All right, the locking nut on this is a 13, which was not very tight. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead now and back this off just a little ways. We'll get our feeler gauge in there, and then we'll just snug this up to our feeler gauge. So you get a slight bit of drag on it, and that feels pretty good right there. So I'm going to run the nut back down, launched my wrench. So I'm just going to try to snug this up a little bit, double check it. Yeah, and right there we've got a slight bit of drag, so we should be good right there. We'll go ahead and lock this into place, and then we'll check it one more time. Yep, right there is perfect. So we are good there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape off, I'll just get a razor blade and clean up all this gasket material. I'm going to check the other side, and then I'll just show you guys the gasket I'm putting on, and we'll get these covers put back on. I'll let you guys know what the clearances were on the other side. Alright, and I just finished up on the other side. It was almost identical to this side, just the intake needed adjusting. The exhaust was fine on it, and it probably took almost the same amount of adjustment, so they weren't out too far. But it's better to, since we're in here, to go ahead and get those adjusted. Now I am going to be using the Sten's valve cover gaskets on here. This is a 475 452, and the thing I like about using the gaskets instead of the sealant is that we don't have to wait. We can go ahead and just pop these on and call it a day. Now One thing I did notice on the sealant is that because these have like a little ridge on it, it seemed like it basically just squoze out the sealant, and then it was almost metal on metal. I could see it on the other side when I was scraping that gasket off, but so I honestly think that these gaskets are a lot better way to go than putting that sealant. So I've got this all cleaned up, got the mating surfaces on both sides cleaned up, and I've just got to wipe down the other valve cover. But other than that, we just need to install. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just put in the two top ones that'll hold my gasket in place, and then I'll just run them in with the impact. I'm not going to tighten them with that. Now with these, I like to just tighten them by hand, because the gasket is what's going to do the sealing for you. You don't need to really crank them on, plus you don't want to end up breaking anything. So I'll just run them in a little bit. And then check to make sure our gasket looks good. I'm going to put these other two in place. Just get them hand started. And what I'll use is I've got just a little 1/4-inch socket with my 3/8 on there, and we'll just snug these down. If I can see, I don't want to get my head right in your guys' way. Alright, so I got them roughly tight. Now I'm just going to go just with some even hand pressure. We'll go back and forth with it. And we'll call that good. So I'm going to knock out the other side, and then we should be all done. At this point, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and probably pull the machine out of the shop. I've got to get all the snow off from the mowing deck and try to get that in here, and then we can start getting a good look at what's going on with that. Alright, I got it up out here running. I'm going to let this run for a few minutes. I'm going to check for leaks. And then I've got to unbury the mowing deck here, try to get this blown off so we can get it pulled in the shop. Might get a little messy. Alright, well, I got this wiped down and blown off the best I could outside. Got it drug in, so now we can get a better look as to what's going on. As far as the condition of the underside, I've looked over it and everything seems to be in pretty fair shape. Obviously surface rust. And then on the top side here, this mower deck is huge. We're basically just going to dismantle everything on here. I've got new spindles for it, and I was looking, it feels like the bearings are not blown out on the middle one. Yeah, the two outer spindles, I think I showed you guys earlier, the bearings have a ton of play in it, and then the middle one on here actually does not feel too bad, but the bearings are pretty stiff on it. So we'll go ahead and replace all three of those, and then we can check the pulleys. This one I've got to take off in order to get the belt out the way to see how the condition of that one is. And this one over here, it's got a little bit of noise, but the goal is here, we'll probably strip this thing completely down, the anti-scalp wheels, everything, and get it cleaned up. We'll get a paint job on it, and we'll basically put everything new that we need to on it to make sure that this is going to work just as good as it did new. So I'm going to let this thaw out, and then we're going to get to work. It's been sitting out here a couple hours. I think what I'm going to do is throw you guys on the time lapse while I get all of these spindles removed and the pulleys. That way we can speed up the process here, and then we can get a good look as to everything that's going on, and we'll get this mower deck right. Alright, you guys saw me time lapse getting the 2 idler pulleys off and then the 2 outside spindles. Well, my socket started to spin on the middle one, and I guess I had the wrong size to begin with. I was using a 13/16 and this was supposed to be a 7/8. Now, I did get my 7/8 to fit on there really well, and I actually broke my step down because I have a 1/2-inch breaker bar and tried that, ended up snapping it. I've been heating and pounding and heating and pounding and could not get anywhere with this pulley or this spindle. Now I want to save the pulley because I have to have that for the new spindles, but what I ended up having to do was cut the nut off with the grinder, and yeah, so saved you guys about 30 minutes of cutting that off. This thing was just a mess. So I'm expecting basically all of these 10mm bolts that go into the spindles to break. We're gonna go ahead and try one right now. Now, there was one that was broken off on that middle one, and they're just all super rusty. The Craftsman's seem to do that a lot. We're gonna find out on this one. Now this is coming out. To me, it doesn't really matter because the new spindles came with hardware. So I'm just gonna go ahead, go around on here and see if I can get these out. And if they break, they break. But that's pretty much it. We'll just get the bolts out. These spindles will drop down, and then we should be in pretty good shape with this mowing deck. I've just got to take the 2 bolts off for the chute, and then a few bolts to take the hangers and the wheels off. So I will show you guys once I've got basically this thing totally stripped down. All right, and here we are a few days later. I was finally able to get this deck wiped down and cleaned the best that I could. Now, there was a lot of paint peel on here, so I took a flat blade and just went across and scraped almost everything that I could. And then once I got done with that, I hit a lot of the spots with a wire brush, and then went over the whole mowing deck with a medium grit soft sanding block. And it's pretty much where we're at with it. I have already gone ahead and touched up all the spots on here that had exposed metal or flash rust from when I got everything cleaned up. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead, go up to Tractor Supply and get a couple of cans of some John Deere yellow Rust-Oleum, and probably put 2 coats on it. Show you guys when I'm done with that, and then we can begin on reassembling this deck and getting this thing right. All right, and here we are a couple of days later. I've been letting this dry. It's been pretty cold, so I wanted to let it cure for a few days. I've got some John Deere yellow Rust-Oleum, and I went ahead and got the flat idlers out. Now, these are a 280-242. We'll have 3 idlers. We'll have one here, one there, and then we've got the tensioning plate, which I've got outside right now. I just threw some black paint on that so it would look a little bit better. And then we're gonna go ahead and get these spindles mounted up on here. Just to show you guys real quick. So these ones have the greasable cert fittings on them, so we should be able to keep these maintained and keep them greased. It is a 285/883, and so these are going to mount up through the bottom and then bolt on. These are already pre-threaded and came with hardware, but what I want to do is make sure that the grease fitting is aimed towards the outside of the mowing deck, so whoever greases this next will be able to get to those points pretty easily. But I'm going to go ahead, show you guys just getting one of the spindles mounted up, and then I'm going to finish getting basically the mower deck assembled, show you guys, and then we'll get it all mounted up on the tractor. So like I said, it came with the hardware. I'm just going to get it up in position, figure out where our holes are at, and then it should just be the 4 1/2-inch holes to get this lined up right. Alright, so right there we are good. It's going to point us in that direction, so I'll just go ahead and get my bolts started. I'll get 2 of them. And I think what we'll do is I'll get these nice and snug down. I'm gonna get the other 2 in, obviously, But once we get the mowing deck on and we run it for a little bit, I'll come back through and just re-verify and retighten, make sure that the bolts are nice and secure. That way don't have any issue with the bolts walking out or anything like that. That's pretty much it as far as the assembly on it. We'll go ahead, these come with dust caps, and then we've just got the pulley that goes right on top with the nut, and then on the bottom side we just got the blade, a washer, and then a nut. Alright, I've got everything basically buttoned up here on the top side. I did put a little bit of grease in between the pivot here where the bracket is onto the mowing deck. That way we've got smooth action on the tensioner. But this is the way the belt is routed on the machine. I've got the tension spring back on and basically everything ready to go. Now I am going to be putting some medium lift blades on here. They are a 330-704, and I'm going to go ahead, I'll get the blade in place, make sure it goes into the grooves that it's supposed to, and then you have a concave washer, so one side is kind of rounded. This would be the rounded side. That needs to go towards the ground, and that helps basically, once you compress this washer a little bit, that holds the nut into place. I've gone ahead on the nuts and put some anti-seize, so that way they won't be so hard to get off next time. But I'm going to go ahead and finish up with the blades, and then we can go ahead and get this mounted up and finally start testing this machine out. Alright, and I've got the deck on here. That thing was a bear to put on, but I got it in place. Everything turns over smoothly. Made sure that the belt, everything was lined up properly, and we look good. Now this was the original belt, but it was in really good shape, so we're just going to continue using that. I did go ahead and level out the deck. I think it was this side here that was lower than the other, but I've got this gauge here. It's a deck leveling gauge. It is a 750-442, and what you do is the arm on the inside, this actually touches the lowest point of the blade, and then it just tells you in inches what your blade is set at. So I did level out side to side, and then as far as front to back on it, I dropped the nose probably about 1/8 of an inch lower than the rear is. So I think we are in pretty good shape. The only thing left I've got to do is put on the deck chute, and I did not put that on yet because I wanted to level up the mowing deck first. I've got a brand new air filter to go in. It is a 102-008, and besides that, I think we are in pretty good shape. I've been working on cleaning this up, but I'll show you guys that when we get it outside and give this a shakedown. Now, one last thing that I want to do besides putting on the chute is test to see if our voltage is good, if we're getting the power that we need. We should be somewhere around between 13 and 14 volts at high RPM to operate the electric PTO on here. And I did snag a battery out of one of my other mowers that I put a new battery in recently. So let me get you guys set up. We'll crank it up, test the voltage, and then we'll go test everything out. Alright, so got the leads hooked up. See where we're at right now. Maybe. So we've got 1281 in this battery. Like I said, we should be around 13 to 14 volts to run this electric PTO, and we'll check to see if the headlights work because I did hook up the harness on it. So give it a whirl. Alright, well, headlights work, and we are charging at about 14.2, so we should have any issues with that. That should be able to continuously run the PTO, and I think we are on a home stretch here. So I'm going to go ahead and get the chute back onto the mowing deck and check over a couple other things. I am going to go ahead and grease up the Zert fittings on the spindles, and I think that's pretty much about it. So let me finish that up, button up the covers, stuff like that, and we'll take it outside and give this thing a full test run. All right, and here we are, the final product that you guys are going to see. There are still going to be some more touch-ups I want to do on this machine. I think I'm probably going to wet sand the hood, at least on the top where it was kind of sun-baked, and just doing some touch-up paint and stuff like that on the frame. But overall, this mower came out really nice for where we started. You guys remember how crusty this thing was, and I've gone over it, buffed it, put a little ATF shine on here, and overall I think we are in really good shape. Basically everything we needed to replace on the mowing deck has been done. We've done basically a full tune-up on the engine. I still am going to change the oil come springtime when I go to put this up for sale, but we've got the new fuel filter in there. We got the new pulse line for the pump, air filter. It's got a new battery, which I may or may not keep this one in here. I may get a higher cranking amp one, but so far this is working great. What else? We greased the steering on it. We've cleaned the fuel tank, and I did put that other seat on here. What else? I think that's kind of where we're at with it. It should be a nice solid machine for somebody. It's still less than 100 hours. I think it was reading, yeah, it's at 99.3 now that I've been running it for a bit. But yeah, let's go ahead and put this thing through a test. I'm not going to be able to mow any grass because we don't have any, but we'll go ahead, turn the deck on, make sure it mows in reverse like it's supposed to with the switch, and just double check, make sure it's all functioning. Alright, well, nothing I can say other than it runs great now. Everything seems to work as it should. The hydrostatic's nice and smooth, the deck's nice and smooth, the engine runs great. We basically got everything serviced up here besides the oil change and a few little touch-ups, but I am super excited, and I don't know, I think this should turn around to be a good mower for anybody that wants to buy it in the springtime. I don't know, what do you guys suggest, or what would this sell for in your area? I would say probably 800 to 1,000. I did put up a short that I said if you were to basically buy this mower new right now in our market, it would be about $4,000. I think I looked up at Lowe's and it was like $37.99 or $36.99 for a 24 horse 54-inch cut John Deere. So yeah, prices are getting high and higher every year. So hopefully somebody will be able to use this reconditioned mower and get some good use out of it. But if you guys stayed this long, I really appreciate it. If you guys like this kind of stuff, make sure to hit that subscribe. We're gonna have some other cool content coming up. I've got some mini bike stuff and some mud mower stuff coming up as well. So I appreciate, as always, you guys checking out the channel, and love hearing from you guys in the comment section. So on that note, let freedom ring, let those small engines sing. I'll see you all on the next one.